Hello and welcome back to the channel after a long break. Welcome to my presentation, Road to Damascus, visiting Syria's capital before the fall of Assad. In this video, I will summarize my impressions from my short trip to Damascus, the capital of Syria, which took place in September 2022, to describe my experiences of how the city looked like in the last years of the Ba'ath Party regime of Bashar al-Assad and the Assad dynasty. At the time of filming this video, it has been approximately a month since the fall of Assad in December 2024 and his subsequent flight to Russia, and there is still a certain sense of ambivalence and uncertainty as to what the future will bring in Syria, as the Islamist rebel group of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Levant Liberation Organization, has taken over governing. The situation was quite different in September 2022. Assad was everywhere, as you can see on the photo. I was traveling in Lebanon at the time, and I decided to make a short detour to Damascus from Beirut, which is approximately a 3-hour drive. The process of acquiring a visa for Syria was quite simple. The approval had to go through a tour agency, which also facilitated a driver from Beirut and a tour guide in Damascus. As with my experience in North Korea, money talked, and as soon as the fees were paid, I had the opportunity to visit Syria, which was still technically in a civil war at the time, even though there was a ceasefire and no major conflict had occurred in 5 years. Nevertheless, there was slight trepidation before the trip. There were news of Israeli forces bombing the airport in Damascus, which was not an irregular event, as Israelis intended to cut off the weapon supplies coming from Iran to Damascus and then afterwards to Lebanon. Along with that, my hosts in Beirut, in the apartment where I was staying, was being a bit nervous because he was unsure of the situation in Syria. I was supposed to come back to his apartment after my trip, and this all resulted in a relatively sleepless night. However, I can report that the road to Damascus went without incidents and did not include conversion, epiphany, or enlightenment, but it did include the bribing of 5 soldiers at various military checkpoints from the border to the city. Upon entering the country, even though this picture shows us exiting the country, one immediately noticed the ubiquitous photos and posters of the Assad family, primarily Bashar, but also his father Hafez, who ruled Syria from 1971 to 2000, and Bassel, the firstborn son of Hafez, who died in a self-inflicted car accident in 1994. Therefore, this was the secular Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, reminiscent of the triple personality cult and family dynasty of Kim in North Korea. Hence, since they were everywhere, road to Damascus. Speaking of North Korea, one of my wishes was to visit the Kim Il-sung Park in Damascus. The so-called great leader of North Korea received a park. A park was bestowed to him after the beginning of the Syrian civil war in 2011, as the Assad regime upped the ante of anti-American sentiments, provocations, and possibly also to symbolize the friendship between the two countries. The image of the great leader was enhanced and nourished by Assad becoming a strong and powerful military figure, which is quite a leap from an ophthalmologist's career in London, which is what Assad was before he took over power in Syria, as this role was supposed to go to his brother who died in 1994. And this picture is from the al-Hamidiyya Souk in central Damascus, where bullet holes can be seen on rooftops, but this is not from this civil war, but from the great Syrian revolts against French rule 100 years ago. Even old monuments, such as the 2,000-year-old Temple of Jupiter in the Old City, adjacent to the al-Hamidiyya Souk, were decorated by pictures of the Assad family. Basically, shops, shisha bars, restaurants, stands. He was everywhere. It rivaled and maybe even surpassed the number of portraits I have seen of the great leader Kim Il-sung in Pyongyang. This picture is from the National Museum of Damascus. This was our first stop. I had to explain to my guide, who was very informative on ancient Syrian history, that I was primarily interested in contemporary history and geopolitics. There was a bit of awkwardness and suspicion at first, as he was hesitant in discussing politics, but soon enough we were in the midst of an intense discussion. As we were driving through the city, I managed to catch a glimpse of the outskirts and suburbs of Damascus ruined by war. The Most of the people I've spoken to in Damascus were not actively supporting Assad, but they were clear in saying that they had a choice, either the Assad government or the caliphate, and this was exactly the word they used. Whether this was truly their opinion, whether any nuance would have been too much for them to admit to an inquisitive tourist, was a different question. But the consensus among the people I have spoken to, which included Muslims and Christians, was that Assad was the lesser evil. However, one needs to take into account that this was a totalitarian society where they might have deemed too risky to say anything against the great leader to a suspicious foreigner. Unlike the suburbs, the center and the old city of Damascus was pretty much undamaged by war, since Damascus remained the stronghold of the Assad government from 2011 to 2024. This is the Umayyad Mosque, one of the, according to some sources, the fourth holiest place in Islam, the alleged tomb of John the Baptist, namely his head, and it is also commemorating Imam Hussein, one of the holiest figures in Shia Islam. Within the mosque, soldiers, citizens, religious people were bowing to the shrine of John the Baptist. This is another sanctuary in the lovely old city of Damascus, the Melkite Greek Catholic Church, where Pope John Paul II was in 2000 presiding over a mass. One of the gentlemen I talked to managed to smuggle in and witness this mass, pretending to be a member of security, as he was Melkite Catholic. This gentleman was also adamant in saying that the Assad government is the lesser evil due to the rights of minorities for fear of ISIS. There was another gentleman whom I asked what he was doing during the Syrian civil war, and he said he worked as a guard in Sednaya, which was interesting since Sednaya was the town where the notorious Assad prison was located, where men, women, and children were beaten, held without trial, and one can see in the news in the last couple of weeks people who have finally seen daylight and freedom after many years in incarceration. Meanwhile, during the Assad years, life went on. This is a Christian wedding. I have also witnessed a couple of happy Syrians invited me to have dinner with them, which is not an unusual situation to have in the Middle East. During my travels in Iran, I was also invited to many such occasions, many such home cooking dinners for a foreigner who dared to come. Unfortunately, there was no time for that in Syria, as I was in Damascus for only one day. In any case, everyday life scenes were present in a pleasant and clean city atmosphere. Women, both veiled and unveiled, were walking freely. Famous Syrian ice cream was made on the right-hand side. This is a weird angle. It is not a toilet. It is the pounding and stretching of a Syrian ice cream in the famous ice cream parlor Bagdash. Nevertheless, certain tension was felt. There were plenty of soldiers on the streets. We had a weird situation where it was forbidden for us to enter the train station. Soldiers were not allowing us entrance. A soldier even yelled at my guide for some reason. So there were a couple of unusual situations which I could not, due to the language being obviously spoken in Arabic, I could not understand exactly the reason, but in any case, the city was quite clean, quite orderly, and there were no particular incidents. Basically, these were the same scenes in Damascus. Peaceful, business as usual, with maybe a slight mounting tension below the surface. What is the future of Syria now remains a mystery. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which has overthrown Assad, only has allegedly 30,000 soldiers. Elections are probably far away in the future. At least 7 million Syrians are displaced. Syrian Democratic Forces, led by Syrian Kurds, hold the northeastern parts of the country, under the caretaking of Americans, where they have thousands of ISIS prisoners in prison. It is unclear what their cooperation with HTS now is. There are fears that Turkey, that gave the green light to HTS to overthrow Assad, will attack the Kurds because they consider the Syrian Democratic Forces to be an extended hand of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which they proclaim to be a terrorist organization. The United States consider HTS to be a terrorist organization. What is not reported as much in the media as I would like to is that HTS does not have control over entire Syrian territory, which we have summarized right now. As I was leaving Damascus, I have managed to take a photograph of this particular gentleman. This is a cameo by the former military leader of Iranian al-Quds forces, the charismatic Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in a drone attack ordered by President Donald Trump in Baghdad in 2020. It is widely believed that the Assad regime would not survive in the first years of the Syrian uprising and civil war without the support of Shia Iran, of their al-Quds military forces, due to their geopolitical and economic ambitions of creating an axis of resistance from Iran all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, towards Israel first and foremost, but also to Turkey and Saudi Arabia as the main Sunni Islam regional powers. There is, of course, also the Russian intervention in 2016, which was an important setback for Syrian rebels at the time. This is a picture of Hafez and Bashar al-Assad, but this is in Lebanon. This is in a Shia village controlled by Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a Shia Muslim paramilitary organization and political party, mostly financed by Iran, which, together with Russia, was a major factor in Assad remaining in power during the Syrian civil war up until 2024. During my conversation with a guide at the Hezbollah Resistance Museum in South Lebanon, this guy also emphasized that ISIS, the caliphate, was a danger for Lebanon as well, and Assad needed to be defended. This has all changed with Hezbollah's current war with Israel, where they were significantly weakened, and along with Russia's war with Ukraine, the attention of Assad's main allies was elsewhere, and this has contributed to his swift and quick and efficient fall. We hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel for Syria, even though Ahmed al-Shara, the leader of HTS, was associated with ISIS at the beginning of his political and soldier career. He now claims, and the movement now claims, that they are far away from that kind of ideology. We will see what happens. During my last hours in Damascus, I had a nice beer with my guide, and this was our goodbye. Damassadus goes into history, and it remains to be seen whether the future of Syria will be peaceful, for which we are all hoping for. But Bashar al-Assad, in any case, is saying goodbye to Syria. And there is only sunset for Damassadus and for the 53-year reign of the Assad dynasty. What the future holds for Syria remains to be seen. I have been quickly in touch with the representative of the tour agency, who stated that the situation is quite good now and that all should be perfect, I quote, after freedom. One should only dare to hope. Stay tuned and check out the description of the video for more details on my work as a writer and lecturer. Feel free to subscribe. Thank you.